Joe, another Joe. Hello, Joe. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Okay. I tried to answer the last time you called for Joe.
I'm sorry. We did. Yeah, we had two Joes there. Yeah.
I just have a few questions for Mr. Harris, and I'll keep it short so that other callers can get through. I'm just curious how gun-free zones work, because it seems like these mass shootings that we're seeing more of seem to always occur in those type of areas. And relating to the mass shootings terminology, it seems like gang shootings has just disappeared, and now those are lumped in with mass shootings. So I'm trying to figure out how to differ between the statistics. And I know there's a lot, like tens of thousands of gun laws already on the books across the nation. So I'm curious if Mr. Harris could tell us why we're not seeing more prosecutions on the violations of the existing laws. And one last comment to one of the previous callers about the muzzle loading. There was a puckle gun before the Constitution was ever written, so it might be something that Mr. Harris could also explain a little bit. And that's all. I'd like to hang up and listen to his responses because I can't listen on the phone.
All right, well, go ahead. We'll let him respond. Go ahead and respond to that call there.
Well, Joe does make some interesting points. There have been some studies that document the relationship or the correlation between some of these mass public shootings and what's referred to commonly as gun-free zones. And it is an accurate conclusion that many, if not most, of these mass public shootings that aren't gang shootings, let's set those aside for the minute, but like in Knoxville, like in Parkland, like Sandy Hook, like in the movie theaters, most of these do occur in gun-free zones, places where the assailants at least have a comfort level that they're not likely to run into armed resistance from the average citizens in that venue. On the statistics, I think she makes a good point that you don't see frequently data being reported that separates gang-related activities where they're shooting each other versus these mass public shootings that are typically an individual assailant just taking on victims that they've really had no provocation from. They just go in and slaughter innocent people. So I do think those are separate kinds of mass shootings, and I think they do need to be data-driven separately, but they're not being. And then she had another point, but I don't recall.
Something about, I think she's saying there was a machine gun back in the 1700s, I think was her point.
Well, we had we had Gatling guns, and we had, back then they still had cannon. So that's one of the things at Lexington and Concord that the British was trying to seize was privately owned cannon. So there were weapons available beyond just what we think of as a routine muzzle loader. There may not have been a large proliferation of them, but there were civilian ownership of weapons of mass destruction, let's put it that way.
Okay, let's go to Brandon. Hello, Brandon.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, there was a incident in East Nashville a couple of days ago where somebody got stabbed in a Kroger's. And then there was an incident in Washington, D.C., where a gentleman ran over a Capitol police officer and killed him with his car. And I'm just wondering, when the media addresses those types of situations, they don't call it knife violence or car violence, but like in Boulder, Colorado, they call it gun violence. So I just want to get your take on the rhetoric that is used.
The rhetoric that's used. Okay. What is your take on that?
Well, my experience on this has been, and keep in mind that my background before I became an attorney was a sociologist, is that we do see a difference in terminology. Certain kinds of violent crime are referred to as criminal activity based upon the individual performing it, as opposed to, like, gang, activity, and not necessarily focusing on the particular weapon that they may or may not have used. On the other hand, gun-related violence, I think, is more commonly classified so that the focus is on the gun as opposed to the individual committing the violence. And I think a part of that is this push from the left and the complacency with the news media of trying to make the gun the evil element so that it's convincing people one way or the other that the gun is what is evil, and that if we eliminate the gun, this violence isn't going to happen.
Certainly the gun allows the evil person to do a lot of damage. Now, I can say in some cases the media is moving away from reporting the individual involved because they obviously are mentally disturbed, and there's some thought that all that person wants is attention. And so you don't give them that attention. They want notoriety, they want to be famous, and they want to go out in a blaze of glory. And there was a time when those names, we certainly knew those people better than we knew the victims. And that didn't seem right. Frankly, they've become so common that I think there has been a pullback on the part of the media. But certainly everyone knows that there was a car that was used at the Capitol. Everyone knows when there's a knife used, and it's perfectly appropriate for people to know when there's a gun used and 10 or more are killed. I mean, I don't think there's anything crazy about that. All right, let's go to Lucy. Lucy, go right ahead. We only have a minute, Lucy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm trying to understand some logic here, but first I want to say that Tennessee still is the #1 state when it comes to the prescription of psychotropic drugs, and I think we lead that way. I think it happened because we offered TennCare, and all these people that couldn't get mental health care moved to Tennessee. So I do see a cultural shift there with the paranoia and fear of the New World Order and how we're supposed to overthrow the government because of super secret pacts and the Illuminati are running the government now. I get all that. But this is what I'm having a problem understanding. I'm trying to understand this new charges against somebody who steals a gun. Now, the way I'm seeing it is that a gun is an innocent entity, and its owner left it out in its car on its property, and some thief came along and stole it. So what I'm trying to figure out, if that thief went down the street and stole every gun in every car that was left open or, they smashed into, that would be a charge for each one. Because the way I'm trying to figure this out is, I was always taught that gun's my responsibility. And by the way, I still have my gun racks from my truck from the 70s out the garage. But it's the individual's responsibility for that gun. So that would be like me letting my kid, 2-year-old, run around loose and some child rapist got it. Now, that child rapist would be charged with every count of rape. So explain to me the logic behind that law. And do you just have a wild night of crime and you steal 40 guns? Because that's easy to do here in Nashville, and you get 40 charges.
Okay.
And how many decades do you stay in prison? That's what I want to know. Explain that one to me.
Okay, and we're going to take a break and come back and be ready to explain that. So don't forget that question. We'll take a break, be back right after this.